Ladies and gentlemen, fight fans all around the world, let's talk some boxing. We're talking Floyd Mayweather TBE round 11. Now, Stephen A. Smith and ESPN, they clearly state that they don't think that Floyd Mayweather is the best boxer ever. TBE. Let's listen to Stephen A. Smith.
I think that people get lost in the sense of when Mayweather throws around TBE, the best ever. All-time great fighters don't fight like that. I think that's the reason. I mean, this was not an exciting fight.
Listen, a lot of Floyd Mayweather Jr.'s fights haven't been fight. I want to hear that.
Right. But if you're going to be put in that category of all-time greats, you better figure out the way to close the show.
No.
We don't believe that. Absolutely. You don't know who doesn't believe it. We don't believe he's the best ever. He does. There's some that say that. Well, that's what I'm saying.
Here's a little bit more. Stephen A. Smith again.
What I'm saying to you is this. Do I believe he's the best in the world ever, rather? No, I do not. He and I have debated about this for years. He and I go back and forth, and it was nice to see him talking to Joe the way that he talks to Joe, because that's how he argues with me about it practically every time we see one another. He firmly believes he's the best because he believes we all don't know boxing.
Let's roll back to Joe Tessitore so you can hear what ESPN has their take on him, what they think he is.
Best defensive fighter of all time.
No, I'm the best fighter.
Best defensive fighter of all time.
No, I'm the best fighter ever. Not just
Considering
defense. We're gonna go to the stats, and we're gonna talk about Mayweather, and we're gonna talk about other legendary fighters.
Oh.
So Joe Tessitore, he said to Floyd Mayweather, "We consider you the best defensive fighter ever." And Floyd says no. Now let's just go with that. Let's say that Floyd Mayweather Jr. is the best defensive fighter ever. Let's just go with that argument first of all. In front of you, we have BoxRec, giving you the 80 best fighters of the last 80 years. ESPN, via Kieran Mulvaney, they give, that the ESPN team gives the 50 greatest fighters of all time. And we're going to look at the top 10 greatest fighters of all time. Okay? So we'll look at the top 10 greatest fighters of all time, or all-time greats. And we're going to look at the top 10 best fighters of the last 80 years from BoxRec. Okay? From the Ring magazine, actually. It's the Ring magazine that selected these fighters in 2002 as the best fighters in the last 80 years. Okay? We're going to look at both of them. Let's start with ESPN, alright, shall we? So because it's ESPN that says that they don't consider Floyd Mayweather the best ever, but they consider Floyd the best defensive fighter ever, they'll give him that. You heard Joe Tessitore talking to Floyd and saying that. Let's just look at the top 10 greatest fighters of all time, or all-time greats, right? Sam Langford. Sam Langford was a defensive fighter. Jack Dempsey. As much as Jack Dempsey was a terror, and he was, some guys, as people would say, someone who would take a punch as well, Jack Dempsey still wasn't hit clean a lot. While you can call him the greatest offensive fighter, or one of the greatest offensive fighters, he did have some defense, but I wouldn't call him the greatest or one of the great defensive fighters, right? So we'll leave Jack Dempsey out. Jack Johnson. Jack Johnson clearly was a defensive fighter, all right, and a very good defensive fighter. Benny Leonard was the same. Roberto Duran was the same. Willie Pep was the same. Joe Louis was the same. Henry Armstrong. Henry Armstrong was an inside fighter, but again, it wasn't easy to hit Henry Armstrong, so that you have to consider him a defensive fighter at the same time as he was offensive. Muhammad Ali, the same thing, and Sugar Ray Robinson, everybody knows Sugar Ray Robinson was a defensive fighter. So the top 10 greatest fighters of all time, 9 of them were defensive fighters. And if you think of Jack Dempsey, his strategy of going from low to high to prevent himself from getting pummeled by other fighters, he also had defense, even though he wouldn't be considered a top defensive fighter. In other words, if you were an all-time great and you're at the top of all-time great lists, you more than likely were a defensive fighter. In fact, the top 5 all-time greats were all defensive fighters. So let's just go with that argument that ESPN had. If he is the best defensive fighter of all time, he has to be in the top 5 and more than likely is the greatest fighter of all time, based on their argument. Because the greatest fighters of all time were defensive fighters. Now, mind you, if you say the greatest fighters of all time greats, that's ATGs, it's different to the best fighter of all time. Alright, TBE, the best fighter ever, the best boxer ever, has nothing to do with the greatness of a boxer. Alright, let's go to the 80 best fighters of the last 80 years. At the top of the list again, Sugar Ray Robinson, a defensive fighter, and a very good defensive fighter, one of the top defensive fighters of all time. Henry Armstrong, we already said he was a defensive fighter. Muhammad Ali, one of the best defensive fighters of all time, right? Joe Louis, defensive fighter. Roberto Duran, defensive fighter. Willie Pep, defensive fighter. Harry Kreb was more of an activity guy, more like Manny Pacquiao kind of style. I don't know if he was a defensive fighter in its pure sense of the word. Benny Leonard, defensive fighter. Sugar Ray Leonard, defensive fighter. Pernell Whitaker, defensive fighter. So 9 out of the 10 of the top 10 best fighters in the last 80 years were all defensive fighters. If you say Floyd Mayweather is the best defensive fighter of all time, what are you saying? He should be at the top of this list then. Just based on that argument. Let's move on. Let's go with the truth. The interesting thing about ESPN is they rank Floyd Mayweather in the last 25 years. He is pound for pound the #1 boxer in the last 25 years. Wasn't Roy Jones Jr. Roy Jones Jr. has a lot of offense, but he's not as defensively sound as Floyd Mayweather Jr. Floyd Mayweather Jr. is #1 because he gets the wins, 1. 2, they can't see anyone who can beat him, pound for pound, right? That's what pound for pound means. And why is that? Because of defense. Because of defense. Say it with me. Because of defense. Defense. So if you say that Floyd Mayweather is the #1, and he probably was, the #1 defensive fighter in the last 25 years, that's what made him the #1 pound for pound fighter in the last 25 years. Right? So even if we're going with Stephen A. Smith and ESPN's logic that Floyd Mayweather is the best defensive fighter of all time, then it almost automatically qualifies him as the best fighter ever, or the best boxer ever. Because if you're defensively responsible while you're conducting your offense, you're not going to be beatable by anyone. And that immediately makes Floyd Mayweather pound for pound #1, just based on their own argument. Their own argument makes the case for him to be TBE. Now we're going to go to the reality of the situation. Alright? We went with their argument, but truly, Floyd Mayweather himself says to Joe Tessitore, and let's hear it again. He says to Joe Tessitore this.
Best fighter ever. Not just
Considering
defense.
that, best defensive fighter of all time.
No, I'm the best fighter ever. Not just
Considering
defense. We're gonna go to the stats, and we're gonna talk about Mayweather, and we're gonna talk about other legendary fighters.
Okay.
Okay. No fighter in history has landed on a higher percentage than Floyd Mayweather.
In terms of CompuBox tallies.
Exactly.
Now, the first thing Floyd Mayweather just talked about there was offense. He's saying no one has had a more precise and accurate offense than Floyd Mayweather Jr. And this is very, very true. His percentages landed are higher than any other fighter in the history of boxing once you have film footage of them. This is very true. His plus-minus ratio, which has more to do with his offense and his defense, is also higher than any other fighter in the history of boxing. I am going to show you this clip right here. And I'm going to play it over and over again to emphasize a certain point. Defense means nothing if it is not meshed well with offense. This is why I continue to say to people that it's not about being the best defensive fighter. Nicolino Loesch, for example, and Pernell Whitaker were fantastic defensive fighters. James Toney. But there are certain things that Pernell Whitaker and Nicolino Loesch particularly did where they weren't conducting offense, they were completely on the defense. Take for instance, Pernell Whitaker on the ropes would not be doing this, what you're seeing right here. Okay? You wouldn't see this. In fact, this is not even counterpunching. Well, it's in part counterpunching, and I'll explain to you what's actually going on here. But first, Floyd Mayweather Jr., very important for you to understand, is not a defensive fighter, but a defensively responsible fighter. You will notice that Floyd is actually conducting offense here. And what's even more incredible is the fact that Floyd is actually leading off with the offense. He's the guy that initiated the offense. So this is not counterpunching. He's not counterpunching Alvarez. Alvarez is a counterpuncher, and Alvarez responds to counterpunch Floyd. And he's unsuccessful. Okay? Everybody got that? That is Floyd initiating offense against the ropes. Now this is because Floyd is able to think 10 steps ahead of his opponent. And the reason why Floyd knows what his opponent's about to do is because he sets up his opponent, what we call trap setting, to actually conduct offense a certain kind of way. Now let me explain to you what's going on here, because what you're seeing here is not what's actually going on. First of all, many of you would think that Floyd Mayweather Jr. is standing in front of Canelo Alvarez. The opposite can be said to be true. Floyd is standing at the side of Canelo Alvarez on his weak side. That's the first thing. If you pivot around an opponent, you will see that Floyd is standing on the side of Canelo. But because he has remote footwork, his feet are in a different angle to his upper body. He's able to snap into the shot and land that straight left followed by an overhand right while he splits the jab. Okay? Now you will notice Floyd is the one who initiates the jab, but he knows that Canelo is about to throw a punch at him. He knows this because he's probably set the trap so that Canelo would throw his jab. He times Canelo as he's about to throw the jab, and he throws his jab. He's closer to Canelo than Canelo suspects, and he's at an angle to Canelo where he can catch him on his chin, whereas Canelo actually will find it difficult to counter at that angle, both with his lead hand and also with his power hand. More importantly, so that you guys can understand how complex this little mix is, Floyd makes it look like Canelo has backed him into the ropes. In fact, Floyd is comfortably in the pocket at an angle that Canelo has not figured out yet. Look at Floyd's lead foot to see where the angle is. He's actually angled in at the side of Canelo Alvarez. He's almost at a T angle to Canelo Alvarez. Alvarez hasn't realized that. And by the time he realizes it, it's too late. He's already been countered with the overhand right. But Floyd led off with the jab first. Now, the offense that Floyd has done is also not just defensively responsible, but it also works as a defense. The jab offensively hits Canelo and snaps his head back. That's the offense. It's followed by the overhand right, which again snaps Canelo's heads back and will deter him from attacking Floyd later on in the fight. He will hesitate. But defensively, it also creates the space for Floyd to do what he wants to do. He wants Canelo at a certain range. And Canelo now has been disrupted from mounting his own offense, which therefore protects Floyd. You can see him snap back into his true position on the true line and true position away from Canelo. He's done all of this without taking a single step. Floyd stays in his stance, holds his ground, and does this because he knows he's at a very good position. He has the advantage in position over Canelo. You can see that Canelo's counter right misses Floyd. Floyd moves and snaps back into the true line where he really is, his true position. Now, all of this happens mixing defense with offense because Floyd is defensively responsible, as well as he is very good at creating the illusion that he's somewhere where he's not. Part of it is inbuilt into his stance, and the other part of it is inbuilt into his very keen sense of angles. He's very much aware of where he is in his position, and he knows that Canelo is out of position to counter him. Now, Canelo could have done a 1-2, but because of the positioning, Canelo would have to move across his body to get that 1-2. See, when Floyd hits him, he actually knocks Canelo out of position as well. Canelo rotates more towards Floyd in a clockwise fashion, so he can't counter with the right. Then Floyd hits him with the right over the top. Canelo can't therefore drop a 1-2 on Floyd and hit him like Marcos Maidana did. He had to slide outside of Floyd's jab to be able to do that. So not only does Floyd mount an offense, but he also mounts a defense, getting Canelo out of position. In fact, Floyd could have hit Canelo with 3 shots there. He could have hit him with the jab, the overhand right, and then a left hook, which would have really rocked Canelo backwards. But Floyd chose just to hit him with 2 punches. Now this is Floyd going against a bigger, much stronger opponent. If Canelo was to hit Floyd, it would hurt Floyd severely. Okay? He hit him 1 punch on his foot. Floyd had to get his foot massaged, and he had to get the swelling down. Okay? So Canelo was significantly bigger than Floyd. The reason Floyd was able to get this advantage over Canelo, who's a much bigger guy, is because of his stance and positioning. So all of these things are defense. And something that Bernard Hopkins said, which is very true, is that the old school fighters did not bother about power. Power is not everything in boxing. It's your knowledge of boxing. And that's why Joe Smith Jr., who's talking about knocking out Bernard Hopkins, he doesn't understand the amount of stuff you need to know to be able to knock out a fighter like Hopkins. So, do expect a schooling by Hopkins. Maybe even more than a schooling. He may even, if Hopkins is in a mean spirit after he softens up Joe Smith, he may actually seek to punish him. Now, having said that, I wanted you guys to understand Floyd, therefore, is not just a defensive fighter. But the other thing that Floyd shows is his accuracy, and that's what he was talking about. His punch stat percentage of punches landed to punches thrown is very high, because Floyd most of the time is ahead of his opponent, and therefore he knows exactly what he's setting up his opponent to do. You see, it's chess, not checkers, and that's the thing with Floyd Mayweather Jr. He's always in control, and that's what defensive fighters do. So, Floyd is not just a defensive fighter. See, Nicolino Loesch, he was able to dodge punches. Muhammad Ali was able to dodge punches. Floyd not only counters punches, he not only makes you miss and makes you pay, but he will also initiate damage to you. And he very rarely misses when he initiates damage to you. Let me give you another example of Floyd's offense where it's mixed with his defense. Here's a beautiful example of Floyd Mayweather versus Juan Manuel Marquez. It's very pretty to watch, but it's actually a pull counter and an evasive maneuver. It's all flowed into one. There's the pull counter, which is offense. There's the roll under, which is defense. There's the snapback, which is also defense. So Floyd implements his offense seamlessly with his defense. Let me give you another example. Floyd against Arturo Gatti. In this, there is defense and offense. Now watch very carefully when Gatti will try to counter with his jab, but Floyd is to the side of Gatti, just like how he was to the side of Canelo Alvarez. So actually Floyd is at an angle to Arturo Gatti. He's at the weak side of him, and that's why Floyd was able to punish him. Notice the snapback as well by Floyd. Floyd is outside of Gatti's range, outside of Gatti's angle to be able to counter him with the right or with the jab. See, Gatti tried to jab Floyd. There's the jab right there. But he's nowhere in line to get hit with the jab. Floyd is outside the line because of remote footwork. His feet are at one angle and his upper body is at another. That is offense and defense. It's being defensively responsible. It's hit and not get hit. That's what Floyd keeps on telling people about. Here's another example of Floyd Mayweather, again using offense and defense. This is counterpunching by Floyd Mayweather. Here comes Miguel Cotto. Oh, I thought it was a video here. Miguel Cotto will throw this straight right at Floyd. Floyd will roll under it and counter up the middle with a counter right. It's kind of what Jermell Charlo did. It's kind of what many a great fighter does. All right, Charlie Burley, Sugar Ray Robinson sometimes. Sugar Ray Leonard has not really done that, but James Toney does something like that. All right, let me give you some more examples of defense melted into offense. If I can find it here. Okay, here's a good example of defense into offense. All right. There's the defense. The high guard is the defense. What's the high guard? And he goes from there into throwing a left-right combination. Left hook, right hook. Then he goes into pressing his head down. It's a defensive maneuver, but he doesn't stay very long. This is to keep the opponent down so that he doesn't come up and butt you with the head. And then he catches him, because his forearm is on his head, he catches him with the right hook. Okay, Floyd is very short chopping with his shots. So it's defense melted into offense. It's a little bit bending the Queensberry rules there, but it's part of boxing. Okay. Here's some more defense melted into offense. Okay, I can give you a whole bunch of them. Here, this is defense melted into offense. Floyd is probing with the jab. That's an offensive maneuver. You see Canelo Alvarez block, and there's the 2 that comes off of the 1. But watch it, Floyd move out of the way of the corresponding punch coming up, which is an uppercut, which is basically the punch that Floyd threw against Miguel Cotto that I was telling you about. So Canelo comes up with the uppercut here, but Floyd is quick enough to understand what's happening and snap back out of the way of the uppercut. And he only snaps that much away. It's like centimeters away. So there's offense, but then there's also defense. And the reason Floyd is able to do that is because he doesn't extend beyond his lead foot. So he's landing this lead right here, but he doesn't extend beyond his lead foot. If he was to fall in on Canelo Alvarez there, he would have been caught with the right uppercut. Because Canelo was also setting a trap for Floyd there. So Canelo blocked the jab, but he got caught with the 2. And he comes up with the uppercut, and Floyd is not, he hasn't overextended himself like Thomas the Hitman Hearns does, which is why he was knocked out by Barkley, Iron Barkley, back in middleweight. Okay, so I'm trying to show you that Floyd Mayweather is not just purely a defensive fighter like even Pernell Whitaker or Nicolino Loesch. James Toney has a lot more offense. James Toney works on the inside. Okay. And James Toney is very fluent, so I wouldn't say like James Toney. But when you talk about purely defensive fighters, for instance, Pernell Whitaker says he's the best defensive fighter ever, or James Toney says that too. But you can't just have defense. You must always have your offense integrated in with your defense. Okay? You must always have that. Here's another example of defense and offense here. Here is the lead right thrown, and then Mayweather moves backwards. I don't know if we'll see it. There he goes. He rolls under. So he throws the lead right. There's the lead right again, and he snaps back and rolls out the way. So he hits, but he doesn't get hit. Okay? And he's not necessarily counterpunching. He's leading here. That's why it's called the lead right. He leads with the punch, catches the opponent, and then rolls under. Here, he leads with the punch, snaps back, and rolls out for the counter. So it's not just counterpunching, okay? There, he comes in with the shot, and then he uses his forearms, his hands, to make sure that he can block a shot that's coming back. Okay? So, that's why Floyd Mayweather is absolutely correct when he says he's not the best defensive fighter ever. He's actually the best ever at doing what he's doing, and he shows that he has offense, and his offense is very much a very efficient, very effective offense. Okay? Alright, you guys, that was round 11 of Floyd Mayweather TBE. You guys have a great one. before I go, I want you to see this a couple times. Do you understand how effective that movement was? Most boxers slap down the guard of another boxer. Here Floyd slides his hand down to get the jab to his opponent here. This is very rare. He usually go over the power hand or the jab. He kept the power hand in place, and then he jabbed low, and then he countered high. And this is all offense. It's a very, very, very effective offense. Let's see that in real speed. Okay, that's a little faster than real speed, but you get the point. So Floyd wasn't just a defensive fighter. You know, when you see highlights of Pernell Whitaker, he's dodging shots. He's getting under shots. He's throwing very little punches, right? Floyd Mayweather is not like that. This guy, he can lead, but when he leads, you're not going to hit him. That's the point behind it. Hit and not get hit. Nicolino Loesch, his best moments are dodging punches. Even Muhammad Ali, when you see him up against the ropes, against, I believe it was that heavy hitter, I can't remember what his name was. Ali's dodging punches, but he's not making his opponent pay. When you see Mayweather being backed up by Andre Berto, Ernie Terrell, he was throwing a whole bunch of jabs at Muhammad Ali, and he was just rolling out the way, right? And pivoting out the way. When Floyd is moving out the way of Andre Berto's punches, Floyd counters Berto at the end of his run. He pivots Berto in a wide arc, and then he counter punches him. And that's the difference between Floyd and all these other all-time greats. You guys have a great one.